Greetings, my fellow freedom-loving sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning to LL3-Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful realms of planet Earth. Today's date is Sunday, September 21st, 2025. This episode 1898 was Jimmy Kimmel Censored and a weakened UN plans despotic agenda. Before I proceed, you can find me on multiple social media sites and podcast channels. Just type in Looky Luck number 3, Looky Luck Roman number 3 with 3 eyes, or the Looky Luck Roman number 3 podcast. Furthermore, if you have any questions, comments, recommendations, and all that good stuff, whatever you do, please use decorum. Hit me via email to ll3.podcast@proton.me. If you want to donate, go to paypal.me or cash.app/lookluck number 3, or you could follow me on Steemit, plus give me a little crypto love at LL number 3-podcast. Yeah, I was actually looking at this today from the Epoch Times on the readers poll. And it says, political violence up, freedom of speech down. And it was talking about, of course, the murder of Charlie Kirk and the civic climate, today's civic climate, all that good stuff. And I was just amazed on what they what they done here. Epoch Times is pretty good. It's a decent newspaper. And like it says here, Kirk's assassination marked a literal turning point in American politics, according to nearly 88% of the participants in the Epoch Times' latest reader poll. I'll just go down here about increased political violence, decreased political tolerance. 96% of respondents to the Epoch Times agree that there is an increased frequency of political violence against public figures in the United States. More than 67% said they strongly agreed. And of course here, I'll just go down. The Epoch Times then asked its readers to name what they saw as the source of the greatest undermining of political tyrants. Many respondents called out multiple sources, but out of 19,431 who called out only one source, 47% said blame partisan media, 25% blame social media, 16% blame political rhetoric, and 12% blame the culture of college campuses. So on that angle, okay, you can blame media manipulation, draconianism, mind control, etc. And of course, political rhetoric. Many historians will say it's more like going back to the 1850s before the southern states decided to separate from the Union. And war broke out and all that, which, based on my research, it was an unconstitutional war. So that's just another chat, another topic, another episode for that one. It's really intriguing. And so, like I said, it was looking through all this. And of course, here, an additional 2,361 responded, said all of the above, and another 870 blamed the left, communists or socialists, and Democrats in one form or another. Hundreds or more blamed the country's departure from God, Christianity, and Christian morals and spirituality in one way or another, including the persistence of moral relativism. One participant wrote, a loss of Christian culture and values has made it increasingly impossible to have civil discourse and respect. I recall one gentleman who was deceased almost close to 30 years ago. He told me that but his father said that about the whole separation of church and state, which was totally misconstrued. He goes, what's going to happen? You're going to see society demoralized. It was 1961, and now look what's been happening. Especially when you got, central banking system, states, government knows best, and many of them want to follow that, and look what occurred. Boom. Instead of natural law, They rather have the state tell them how to live. And it just grew, deteriorated, grew, just expanded. And so it was a very interesting article here. And this is right here about the issue with media education. I'll just go down this one paragraph. It says here that a significant majority of poll participants place blame on the state on both mainstream and social media and the state of the nation's education system. More than 64% either disagreed or strongly disagreed with the notion that Charlie Kirk's assassination was covered fairly by the media. Of course, question everything. How accurate is the official narrative, right? And plus, many of them want to twist it, be more dramatized. We know the whole game. This is why the mainstream news stations, they just got 19% viewing. So it's like, hey, reap what you sow, right? And so it says here that more than 60% either I got that one roughly. 96% either agreed or strongly agree that progressive and communist ideology has a strong influence on American colleges. You can use the Communist Manifesto and relate it to the students. That's just one source, you can say, right? And it says here, hundreds of participants wrote in blaming all levels of the public education system for the breakdown in political tolerance, accusing it of pushing activist indoctrination over critical thinking, hosting biased teachers, failing to teach civics, and failing to instill a love of country in their students and at all levels. I always say this too, like, hey, now we got technology. We don't really need the public school system. You could do homeschooling, or they can do a little bit of both, and you could enhance, your child's education, be the mentor. Then they could challenge the teachers, and I call them the projectors, human projectors, a lot of them are, and so forth. The results follow the release of the Walton Family Foundation Gallup poll on September 16th, which indicated only 35% of Americans are satisfied with the quality of today's K-12 education, the lowest satisfaction rate since Gallup began in 1999. So, that tells you something. Tells you the whole thing on freedom of speech, a turning point, and all that. So I will leave this on my footnotes, and if you get it, that'd be great. It is important to know on this matter because freedom of speech is sharing information and ideas. And I actually seen that one interview with what's that gentleman's name? Oh my goodness! But Van Jones was on it. Anderson Cooper tells you how much I really support the guy, right? He had a tweet stating that Charlie Kirk wants to have a debate and disagree, but be agreeable. And Van Jones didn't really get the message until some of his associates said, "Hey, he's trying to get reach of you." This is the day when Charlie Kirk was murdered. Some people say he may have faked his death, but I'm not gonna go there. But a lot of claims. But truth of the matter is, Van Jones was like, wow. And he actually it was saddened him because what happened to Charlie Kirk, even though he had his differences, they can be enemies, but it was not a real hateful relationship, but have, the words instead of weapons and animosity, but principles. So he is going to pay his respects to Charlie Kirk, which is good. And I'm not a Van Jones lover myself, but on a human element, way I observed that interview, he was very disheartened because it would have been a nice discussion. It doesn't have to be at the studio. It could be, on Zoom. Don't matter, but it would have been very good. But he realized, wow, we could still disagree, but be neighborly. And it's all right, because even in my tenure, when I did activism work, I just go out there and mingle with people, network. Doesn't matter if we agree on everything, but we'll share input, ideas, etc. And there are days we had to toss our differences aside and stand as one because of someone in government wants to rule over us, but we have to turn the tables on them. And I've done that a couple times, and I think I can say it was really good. So that's why you always gotta say you have to defend your enemy's liberties. And if not, it will be a precedent. You create a precedent that will be a burden on you. I'm just paraphrasing, but Thomas Paine warned us about this. And many folks with that faction mindset, the hateful faction mindset, just they forget. They get too primitive. And we cannot be in that state of mind. And don't get me wrong, we've all had those exhibitions, including yours truly. However, it doesn't mean we should make that into a habit. We all have our bumps in the road, but we always want to learn to improve ourselves. And what Charlie Kirk did was want to have open discussions. And he got dirty, he got mudslinged. They tried to use every dirty word out of the book towards him, and he never, showed any tension, animosity, or bitterness towards the people that was he was talking to. And that's a good thing, and we need to go back with that. So if you have a civil war, violently or with information. See, one thing I can tell you, the deep state, the globalists, the order, they want this to be a reality, not just in these United States, but around the world. So we need to look at ourselves and examine everything more thoroughly before taking that ball and running with it. You want to achieve things thoroughly instead of false starting. And I digress. But it's a good, interesting articles. I'm going to let you guys read it. So, and I'll be right back. So stay tuned. So the first article I'll be reading here came out on the 19th, by the way, this past Friday. There's going to be another article from the New American. But this was Jimmy Kimmel Censored. This is from the Brownstone staff. As it reads, Kirk was the antithesis of Jimmy Kimmel. Kirk was tremendously influential with the youth, while Kimmel's sanctimony is reserved for a dwindling audience of the blue state elderly among coastal elites. Kirk sought good faith debate, while Kimmel relied on monologues of smears. Kirk was fundamentally decent, while Kimmel was callous and cruel. This week's headlines reveal another difference between the men. The reactions to Kirk's assassination is a grassroots movement, while the fury resulting from Kimmel's suspension is a result of an entitled bureaucracy accustomed to an unaccountable monopoly of the public's resources. Corporate media and its kept activists have howled in response to Kimmel's suspension, but none of its leaders offered an answer to a simple question. Why should the First Amendment protect an ideologue right to make millions from lies on government-subsidized public airwaves? In defiance of market trends, but not independent Americans' rights to dissent from predictable media orthodoxy. The litany of attacks on expression is familiar. We've been exposing this and fighting for 5 years with mountains of documents drawn from FOIA and court discovery. We've exposed the methods, funding, cutouts, and algorithms. We have all the receipts, tens of thousands of pages of them. New York Attorney General Letitia James used the weight of the state to demolish VDARE, Peter Bremelow's website dedicated to immigration. The Biden administration coerced big tech into suppressing critics of the regime's COVID policies. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice sentenced Douglas Mackey to prison for lampooning Hillary Clinton. Climate scientists bankrupted journalist Mark Stein for mocking them. President Biden weaponized international legal systems against Pavel Durov and Julian Assange for facilitating the free flow of information. For Peter Brimelow to Tucker Carlson to Bobby Kennedy to Mark Stein to Alex Jones, the victims of the war on free expression were all independent voices who committed no crime other than deviating from the tenets of the deep state. That hearsay led a parade of Democratic figures, including Ketanji Brown Jackson, Tim Walz, Hillary Clinton, law professors, and left-wing media, a call for removal of First Amendment protections that obstruct their agendas. The First Amendment stands as a major roadblock for us right now, John Kerry remarked last year of the presidential election. During the pandemic response, the Democratic Party attempted to obliterate that roadblock. During oral arguments, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said to the plaintiffs, "My biggest concern is that your view as the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. After all, the public needs accurate information in the context of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic." White House advisor Andy Slavitt lobbied Amazon ban politically unfavorable books and demanded Facebook remove memes ridiculing the COVID vaccines. Director of Digital Strategy Robert Flattery coerced big tech companies to remove malinformation, meaning true content that cut against official narratives. In April 2021, he strong-armed Google into ramping up its censorship operation and told executives that his concerns were shared at the highest, and I mean the highest levels of the White House. Are you effing serious? Flattery asked Facebook after the company failed to censor critics of the COVID vaccine. I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today. At other times, Flattery was more direct. Please remove this account immediately, he told Twitter about a Biden family parody account. The company complied within an hour. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, wrote a letter to Amazon threatening that selling Bobby Kennedy's books were unethical, unacceptable, and potentially unlawful. The Department of Homeland Security, through a subsidiary called CISA, colluded with social media platforms and NGOs to censor Americans through a process called switchboarding. CISA then coordinated with left-wing censorship apparatus like Media Matters, the Atlantic Council, and the Stanford Internet Observatory to suppress unapproved reports challenging the efficacy of masking, lockdowns, and vaccines. CISA classified posts criticizing lockdown measures and mask mandates as consistent with pro-Kremlin media. And they justified their censorship by claiming that anti-migrant, anti-Semitic, anti-Asian, racist, or xenophobic tropes have been at the forefront of the COVID-19 related conspiracies. The history of the censorship apparatus is discussed in great detail in Brownstone Institute's COVID response at 5 years, the First Amendment versus the U.S. security state. Check it out. Good stuff. Perhaps most ironically, Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, demanded that Fox News remove Tucker Carlson from the air in 2023, telling CNN, "We not only have a right to tell Rupert Murdoch and Fox what to do, but an obligation." Remember, he's Pinocchio. "Hi, I'm Charles Schumer. I support the Bill of Rights." Boop. His nose grows. And I'll continue on here. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, used his perch in the House of Representatives to insist that Fox stop airing Carlson, deeming his reports to be lies and propaganda, which he's very good at projecting that too, okay? He's the big liar, okay? And the treasonous whore. And sorry for use that language, but you reap what you sow on your actions, regardless. So I'll continue on. But the cognitive dissonance appears lost on these figures as they bemoan the loss of Jimmy Kimmel from late-night television. Unlike cable outlets, ABC enjoys the government subsidy of public airways and therefore has an obligation to ensure programming is in the public interest. Moreover, it now appears that the decision to fire Kimmel was independent of the chair of the Federal Communications Commission's threat. So there's a big claim on that. All right, so I'll just continue on here. Undoubtedly, Kimmel's late night routine loses the parent corporation, Disney. One moment. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to see here. Tens of millions of dollars per year for the Sinclair, the owner of the local affiliate stations of ABC, swiftly condemned Kimmel's lies, demanded an apology, and announced it would air a tribute to Kirk in the time slot normally reserved for Kimmel's show. Reports now reveal that before the suspension, Kimmel's plan to go on air continued to blame Trump supporters for the Kirk assassination. Advertising affiliates, including executives at Sinclair and Nexstar, called to voice their concerns. Disney CEO Bob Iger and another executive then decided to suspend Kimmel after 66 of 200 affiliate stations say they will not air Kimmel's next episode, according to the Hollywood Reporter. Nonetheless, leaders of the ruling elite now wave the banner of free speech, insisting that Kimmel is the modern Thomas Paine, joined in the maudlin display by other late-night hosts who bemoan their declining market share. Thomas Paine. Can we see the word blasphemy? I'll continue on. But their insincerity is too easily discernible after years of censorship and smears. People like David French of the New York Times blessed the censorship of 5 years, including even that which the platform the sitting president have suddenly converted into free speech absolutists. They wanted everyone to pretend not to notice that the censors were just a few years ago had become the free speech advocates of today. Can we say hypocrite? Yeah, the Rosie O'Donnell effect. I'll continue on. Note, however, that this is selective. They demand the right of Kimmel to preside over a money-losing show without a substantial audience, while remaining silent as YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn daily remove content from Brownstone Institute. Their real voice of anger is the loss of yet another bureaucratic entitlement program, resentment of this hysterics amid Doge cuts earlier this year. From the public airways to U.S. aid and to DEI contracts, the deep state and its media mouthpieces have enjoyed a long-standing structural advantage thanks to the largesse of the taxpayer. Now the primal roar of legacy media echoes throughout the left wing, co-opting the slogan of the free expression as the Trump administration threatens to deal with cultural hegemony, its final blow. And I'll be very honest, I'm not lovey-dovey with the FCC, but the question I have to all those I stand with Jimmy Kimmel, how comes his ratings are so lousy? According to some reports, 129,000 viewers a night in a big network like that? And two, how about his contract? What were the conditions? How many of you geniuses out there that stand for free speech know about contracts? All right, supply and demand. If the demand is low, this continues. You can't really blame the FCC for this. Jimmy Kimmel and his associates screwed it themselves. Their vision was in the hell in the handbasket, as far as I'm concerned. You talk to a man who's not a Jimmy Kimmel lover. However, even the FCC, to get involved, you know what I say? Don't even waste your time, because he's gonna cut him loose anyway, based on all these conditions he was in, and what he achieved was nothing. But I'll continue on here with this other article from the New American, and it says here, the Kimmel's nose under the tent. Actually, Libs are being hoist with their own Petard, and this is from Swelling Duke. Here's what Mr. Duke has to say here. Look, let's be honest. Kamala Harris tweeted in 2019, real Donald Trump Twitter account should be suspended. and the president, Donald Trump, was suspended from Twitter. 2, as he become another in a long line of deplatformed conservatives. We all know as well with the Twitter files released in 2022 and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg's 2024 admission, the Biden administration pressured his website to censor users that the Democrats have been zealously trampling the First Amendment, with ABC's preempting of Jimmy Kimmel Live, indefinitely under the Federal Communications Commission pressure. However, the Democrats' tune has changed. Now they warn the Constitution and freedom of speech are imperiled. Oh, it's not that they aren't standing on principle. It's that their principle is that it only is bad when it happens to them. Absolutely, right? As many know, Kimmel has joined other leftists who recently lost jobs after making inappropriate remarks about Charlie Kirk's assassination. Translation, those who happily wielded the cancel culture curgle for years are now being bulging with it themselves. Of course, and as I wrote recently, all civilizations have their social codes enforced with attendant social pressure. Yet at issue here is, in part, government pressure. The left-wing hypocrisy is intense with respect to both phenomena. Thee and me near the twain shall meet. Making note on this Friday was USA Today columnist Nicole Russell. There has been a backlash over Disney and ABC's decision to cancel Kimmel, she writes. Actors Ben Stiller and Jamie Lee Curtis are upset. Other comedians have responded with support. Russell states that she is disturbed about Kimmel's nixing being partially driven by pressure from the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. Nonetheless, she knows that the left's cancel culture amnesia is striking. It is game they created with rules they made up, Russell points out. Now they hate that it is being applied to them. She then emphasized that Kimmel does have free speech rights. The comment that caused him problems, however, was not just some garden variety joke she has. Rather, she stated on a show that aired Monday, "We hit some new lows over the weekends with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it." Kimmel should have known better, of course. It is an established fact that the assassin, Tyler Robinson, is a left-winger whose actions were driven by leftist imperatives. This gets at what troubled Carr. Kimmel was misleading people regarding the most significant political assassination we've seen in a long time, he explained to CNBC. This said, this deceitful speech does not enjoy First Amendment protection. Heck, politicians lie all the time, as Russell states, too. People should have allowed market pressure to determine Kimmel's fate. And maybe it did. Kimmel's ratings have declined notably in recent years, and the show is likely losing money. So it's entirely possible ABC wanted to cancel it anyway, and that Kirk's comments were merely a handy pretext. Fair play or not, turnabout this is. Whatever the case, examples of people being canceled for refusing to bow at wokeness, left-wing altar bound, as Russell writes. Gino Carano, who was fired from Disney and Lucasfilm's The Mandalorian, on which she enjoyed a leading role after she posted a story on social media comparing the current political climate to Nazi Germany. A lot of regular Americans have experienced cancel culture too, just for holding the traditional conservative views. Peter Vlaming was a French teacher at West Point High School in Virginia who got fired in 2018 for not using a transgender student's preferred pronouns. He sued the school board and they settled the case. Then remember Roseanne Barr. She was also fired in ABC in 2018 under pressure of Barack and Michelle Obama, Barr claims. Google axed employees James Damore in 2017 after he questioned diversity policies. The same year, Professor Brett Weinstein filed suit in opposing diversity schemes and was bullied out of Evergreen State College. Nobel laureate scientist Tim Hunt was nixed by University College London in 2015 for making an innocent joke. Mozilla CEO Brandon Ike, Ike, how can I pronounce his name? Was compelled to resign in 2014 after supporting a traditional marriage proposition. And in 2005, Larry Summers was dislodged from Harvard's presidency after theorizing that men has a unique proclivity for science. The proceeding is just a short list too. What's more, Barack Obama, who recently had the temerity to criticize Trump for targeting enemies, became notorious for weaponizing the federal government. Notably, his administration used the IRS to damage conservative tax-exempt groups. I remembered all these things, folks. Remember, Barack Obama is an arrogant bend-over Bob, okay, to the global system. Plain and simple. And I'll continue on here. Then there was the aforementioned pressure the Obama administration put on social media platforms to censor traditionalists. As I put at the time, the feds were literally doing an end run around the First Amendment, using tech companies as proxies to censor speech. The method to the madness, as already stated, an assertion that any and every cancel culture is in principle wrong is itself wrong. Oh, it may be wrong in a particular, but again, every society has its social codes, as uses scorn or ostracism to enforce them. It would be nice, though, if we could unite in the proposition that our government shouldn't play speech enforcer. Instead, leftists are pretending as if conservatives somehow originated cancel culture and government's role in it. Why? Well, some people have very short memories and often very convenient ones. Many leftists in particular also live in a self-created bubble of rationalization. When they scorned and ostracized people, it was different. They deserve it. This is as much as same as Tyler Robinson believed Charlie Kirk deserved it. And all this rationalization and overt lies as well, and the apparent and ex-mainstream media efforts to convince Americans that MAGA is the real cancel culture threat. You better elect Democrats is the message, or we'll lose our freedoms. The good news is, in that new media, such as the New American, are now preeminent. Consequently, the tongue-stifling, social pressure is increasingly being used against the liars, not the truth tellers. And if anyone should complain, remember this one. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of reach, which ideologists made that common, smug retort some years ago. Hint, it's the same people who are now losing reach. Well, what can I say about that? Like I said before, I'm not crazy about the FCC, all right? If you got to look at the thing with all these dinkleberries are wigging out over Kimmel and never care about anyone else. Total hypocrisy, totalitarian hacks to the core. You get them where it hurts, their wallets. And of course, in the Doge ordeal, which is a double-edged sword, respectfully, USAID money is going to all these multiple places, including these TV shows. Now it's all being frozen up. They're wigging out. People don't want to watch garbage or listen to it. They're tired of being brainwashed. They want to contemplate for themselves. And many people, that's why many of the young people that were at Charlie Kirk's speech and debates were inspired. Doesn't matter what your belief system is. Principle is the key. We need to go back to that consistent practice. We got to spread that everywhere we go. And we don't want to be like these slugs that are trying to tell us how to live and think. I recall when Janet Reno was Attorney General and she's trying to talk about sex and violence on TV. If you don't clean it up, we will. That was in the 90s. Janet Reno, she was some hack who was a district attorney in Miami-Dade County, Florida. There was even claims that she was being provided lesbian prostitutes by the drug cartel. So all the drug madness happened during that time in the 80s. So there's a big claim on that, but I know one thing for sure: she was one corrupt woman. I was never impressed. But when it does it to them, they all wig out, run to the hills. It's like an old saying: if you want to dish it out, you better learn to receive. Remember, criminals hate when people fight back. Let that sink in, folks. All right, I'm going to do one more segment after this break, so stay tuned. Great, we're going to do one more here. Came out on the 20th of September. Another article from the New American. A Weekend United Nations Plans Medical Censorship and Surveillance is by Paul Dragoo. As it reads, the United Nations is going into its 80th annual conference as an organization in decline. Nevertheless, this week, world leaders will meet in New York to discuss how they exploit the world's problems for their globalist end. Under the guise of reducing disease, combating mental illness, and dealing with the next pandemic, the UN plans to use its waning power to surveil and censor people. Since its creation, the UN has sought to exploit legitimate societal threats and problems for their ultimate goal, installing a world government. They don't hide their true intentions. UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres said last year during his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos that the only way to address the world's needs is through strong multilateral institutions and frameworks and effective mechanisms of global governance. Yep. Global Order 101, New World Order, whatever you're going to call it. In 2015, after the UN revealed its Agenda 2030 plan, UN Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Wu Hongbo, cited a long list of problems that only global governance can solve. It's quite the speech to soothe concerns of such power in the hands of so few. He even claimed the UN is just fair and transparent. We need a global governance that encompasses a much broader range of development facets and provides long-term solutions for them, Wu said, adding that the United Nations can become a locus for such global governance. Yeah, attack everything on sight, right? And back in 1962, Council on Foreign Relations member, Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor, and former State Department official Lincoln P. Bloomfield wrote a report for the U.S. State Department in which he said, a world effectively controlled by the United Nations is one in which world government would come about through the establishment of supranational institutions characterized by mandatory universal membership. Exploiting health concerns? A draft laying out one of the discussions happening this week indicates the globalists seek more control over how nations respond to disease, mental illness, and the next health crisis. In the political declaration, they claim they want to reduce death from non-communicable diseases by 30%, make treatment for hypertension and mental illness more accessible, and reduce smoking, all supposedly part of a larger goal to reduce poverty and inequality. The way they intend to accomplish these goals is by bringing together governments, civil society, and the private sector, also known as public-private partnerships that include funding and empowering the UN's public health arm, the World Health Organization. They also plan to enact within national and where relevant regional context legislation and regulation, and they want to develop and implement multi-sectoral national plans, and where appropriate, subnational plans. Is all just a fancy way of saying they want control over sovereign nations' governments. The declaration says that accomplishing, sorry about that, all this will require censorship and surveillance. Yay! Come on, Pam Bondi. Come on, Merrick Garland. Join the UN. This is part of your environment. Censorship is euphemistically defended as necessary to counter misinformation and disinformation about the prevention and treatment of non-communicable diseases and mental health conditions. It also mentions their intent to regulate digital environments. The UN wants to keep track of people's personal data. This is explained under the strengthening governance. One of their goals is to improve infrastructure for systematic and ongoing country surveillance on non-communicable diseases, risk factors, and mental health, including death registration, population-based surveys, and facility-based information systems. Changes to international health regulations, and they plan to reverse, or at least censor. Man, I'm just like saying, getting tongue-tied here. Sorry, folks. The growing skepticism toward the corrupt Western medical establishment. The document says that it is important to acknowledge that there are evidence-based interventions for preventing, screening, diagnosing, treating, and caring for people with non-communicable diseases and mental health conditions. When they say evidence-based, that's a sly way of saying they want to discredit methods and drugs out of the paradigm of the Western medical cabal. This week's meeting is happening not just at WHO's changes to the international health regulations go into effect. These changes essentially give WHO, which is the World Health Organization, more power over how member nations deal with pandemics and other health emergencies. On Friday, WHO announced the changes in a press release. A central message of the release is that since borders don't restrain diseases, globalism is the antidote. The WHO press release says the amendments recognize that infectious diseases and other public health risks do not respect borders and that coordinated global action is critical. Among changes is now a global threat that will trigger stronger international collaboration when a health risk escalates beyond a public health emergency of international concern, or FIEC, and poses the risk of becoming or has already become a pandemic with widespread impact on the health system and disruption to societies. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on his first day of office this year that withdraws the U.S. out of WHO. The White House said the disastrous way the organization handled the spread of COVID-19 and allowed the Chinese to influence it justify the exit, but the withdrawal comes with a 1-year notice period. So technically, the U.S. is still in the WHO. U.S. is not fully on board. That's a question. A number of council members, the COC, the sub-agency of the CFR, discuss what the UN looks like now that the United States has leadership that isn't fully sold on globalism. Ryan Neelam, the director of Public Opinion and Foreign Policy Program at the Lowy Institute in Australia, says, founded to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, the United Nations now finds itself sidelined as conflicts rage in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and tensions between major powers escalate. Legal scholars warn of a catastrophic collapse of norms against the use of force. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump's erratic terrorist policy has fractured decades of broad consensus on rules-based trade. Foreign aid budgets are shrinking, military spending is rising, and global momentum to act on climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, has slowed. The forecast is not looking, especially since the reduction of U.S. funding to the UN, Neelam continued. Amid those geopolitical rifts, the United Nations is under severe financial strain. The United States, its largest donor, contributing some 22% of the regular budget, is expected to announce further funding cuts following review of international organizations ordered by Trump. Hey, like Donald Trump or not, I support this, okay? So that's it. That's good. But I'll continue on. The UN Secretary General, Neelam, adds, will be reducing the UN budget and workforce by 20%. Michel Vellani's president of the Institute of International Affairs in Italy, also noted the effect of American indifference to the UN. The United Nations needs to contend with fierce competition and deep divisions between its member states at the international level, along with the decreased interest in multilateralism, even as the world becomes increasingly independent. The latter is due in part to the detachment of the United States from the activities and structures of the United Nations. Hector Cardenas, president of the Mexican CFR, has a similar complaint. The United Nations is stumbling into its 8th decade with mounting dysfunction. The second Trump administration renewed disdain for multilateralism, evidenced by its withdrawal from the integral bodies such as the World Health Organization and the UN's Human Rights Council, and by its steep cuts to humanitarian aid, has deepened a crisis that was already structural. Getting us out. If this is what the UN looks like with a minimal U.S. support, imagine the Americans could accomplish with a full withdrawal. The United States funnels a lot of money to this subversive organization, but there is no reason for it to exist. By its own admission, it hasn't maintained peace around the world, and again, by its own admission, is a primary goal to hijack power from nation states. If it believes its humanitarian motivations are legitimate, then the catastrophic results should disqualify these people. One need to look no further back than COVID. At the center of Europe's response was the UN through the WHO. The parent company of this magazine, John Birch Society, has been fighting to get the U.S. out of the UN since 1962. The JBS deserves credit for the decades of work its members carried out to expose the true nature of this organization, can create resistance to it. You can learn more about the UN disaster's impact and what you can do to help. There's a link for that. And I'll be very frank. The information is very good. John Birch cited it in the New American. Regardless of what your belief system is, you should always check these guys out. And they have a lot of merit when it comes, in fact, when it comes to this tyrannical, totalitarian institution. Plain and simple. As far as I'm concerned, we need to get out of it. I agree with Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul. Just to name two. Why? Because it's principled. We should not get involved in foreign entanglements. And I believe we need to cut foreign aid as a whole. If you want to donate money to like Israel, for example, do it on your own watch, not mine. And nothing against the people who live there, all right? But the foreign aid, to me, is nothing more than a bribe. And furthermore, the United States needs to cut ties on the powers of foreign influences. I can go on with this. And we know one thing for sure. They're worried. And that's a good thing. So, yes, I want to see the United States leave the United Nations. That's my intake on this. I'd like to hear from you, and that will be it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, all that good stuff, wherever you do, please use decorum. You can hit me via email to ll3-podcast@proton.me. I will leave the footnotes on this episode on the page so you can check it out for yourselves. If you want to donate, go to PayPal.me or cash.app/logo3. If you want to follow me on Steemit, give me a little crypto love, I'm at ll3-podcast. Wow. Getting ready to fall asleep here. Forgive me, folks. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul. and can liberate humanity. Till next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.